you all for coming. My name is Jamie. I'm from Eastwind Books of Berkeley, and we're a local community bookstore located in downtown Berkeley, and we've been serving the book reading community since 1982, and we have a unique collection of Asian American and ethnic studies literature, and we also do a lot of book events with amazing authors and poets. And so today we're really excited to have please keep your mic muted also during the talk, so we make sure folks aren't disrupted. But yes, I have the honor to introduce our two guests, Dr. Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai and our event host, Diệp Vương. And so just a short introduction before I hand the mics off to them. Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai is an award-winning writer in both Vietnamese and English languages. She wrote her epic novel, The Mountains Sing, to honor the painful experiences suffered by Vietnamese women and youth, as well as their remarkable courage and resilience. The novel inserts a much-needed voice into the canon of literature in English about Vietnam. And our event host, Diệp Vương, is the co-founder and president of Pacific Links Foundation and has designed many comprehensive and innovative solutions to combat human trafficking and forced labor to empower youth. She is a refugee from Vietnam and a graduate of Harvard University and San Jose State University, and her commitment to a global cause is born out of her own harrowing experience fleeing Vietnam as a young teenager. So with that, I'll hand the mic over to our two guests, and they'll talk for about 30 minutes, and we'll have 20 minutes later on at the end for questions and answers. So while they're talking, feel free to put your questions in the chat. See, let me spotlight.
Great. Thank you very much, Jenny. I first of all just want to say thank you again for Eastwind Books, because it's really important to have a good bookstore, a local bookstore, and I'm very thankful for you to help us organize this. I'm also thankful for all of you to be here today, of course. But I'm most thankful for Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai for her bravery, really, in writing this book. I don't know if anyone, if all of you have had a chance to read the book, but it took me a long time to go through it, and I think I am just not brave enough to read it on my own if it is not for this event. So I want to say thank you, Quế Mai, for braving and bravery that you display in recounting the history of this past 100 years and the experience of women and young people through this history. And this is certainly a history of war, is a history of forgiveness, but it really is also a history of how women and children become victims and victimized and all of that through wars. So I want to start some questions that I've written down here, and I hope it's not and everybody, you can ask more questions to Quế Mai, who's more than willing to share. What I found was the novel's narrators switch between the grandmother Yu Lang and her granddaughter, and in some ways it's as if those two interlinked women are represented themselves, the same one person throughout this whole 70 plus years of horrendous experience. But today, in today's world, many young Vietnamese and especially diasporic Vietnamese people continue to struggle to open up the conversation between them and their elders. What is telling this story through a multi-generational lens how did you feel about it? What have you learned from it?
Thank you so much, chị Diệp, for your kind words about my work. I need to say first how much I admire you and the Pacific Links Foundation, what you have done to help the human trafficking survivors. You have empowered a lot of people, given them the opportunity for education, for employment, and opportunity to change their lives. So that's just amazing. And I look forward to talking with you about the Pacific Links Foundation later on in the second part of our conversation. But first of all, to answer your question, I mean, I grew up not knowing much about what had happened to my ancestors. There's so much trauma buried within the elderly generation of Vietnamese people that prevents them to share with the younger generation the stories. So I grew up not knowing that how my grandma had died in the Great Hunger, or how my grandpa was killed because of the land reform, and so many horrible things that happened in the past. So I only knew what questions to ask when I became a writer, when I started researching a lot about the history of Vietnam, and I had spoken to a lot of people. So I ventured into conversations with my parents. So my father told me incredible things. I'm like, I was just so shocked. And I did not know that he was prevented to go to school. He was once he was forbidden to enter high school, because of some political issues in the family. So it's all very complicated. And I think that the older generations of Vietnam have a tendency, they think that they want to protect us by not sharing their traumatic experiences. So I think writing this novel gave me the chance to reflect on my own family's history and the history of our community and what we went through, not just as Northern Vietnamese or Southern Vietnamese, but Vietnamese in the diaspora as well, what we went through together as a community, and to put the issues of our community on the center stage. I mean, I've read literature about Vietnam in English for many years, and I was just frustrated and how we are still used as background for the American stories. Stories set against the war in Vietnam are normally about Americans, or even Hollywood movies, how they depict our women, as sexual objects, as exotic objects, as though absent of trauma and absent of agency. So I wanted to reflect on that and write against those stigma and those representation issues. So I think, it meant a lot. I mean, I wrote this novel for myself, to understand myself, my beliefs, and how I could make sense of the world, and how I could make sense of our very complicated history. And I'm really encouraged that quite a few readers who are Vietnamese or Vietnamese Americans, who have reached out to me and who said, after reading your book, I talked to my parents, I talked to my grandparents, and I found out so many incredible things. And quite a few of them said, I want to write my own book too. And I really encourage you to document your family stories, whether it's for publication or not, but it's important because our stories are our heritage. We can learn so much about what happened in the past, so that the past really informs our future and can educate us and can teach us so many things.
Wow. Well, thank you for the encouraging note. I think that what's amazing reading through the book is the sense of optimism, the sense of being able to survive, but surviving with grace. It's so amazing to me. I think, Yu Lan and her granddaughter had a chance to live some experience together that allowed them the bond that they have. They were together, hand holding through the bombing of Hanoi and whatever not. So there's how do we get that opportunity to bond with our elderlies? It's important. What you just said about being discriminated against, remind me of the fact that I decided to be a boat person. I decided to do the being simply because I knew I would not have been allowed to go to college. And I just didn't know what else to do growing up, wanting to study, wanting to and not being able to go to college. So so that set me off on a journey that was unbelievable in so many ways. One of the things that I felt, your whole, the novel talks, there's so much Vietnamese saying in the novels, but I also saw that there are so many of those are mostly very, how do you say, uplifting, very unifying, very positive, with some rare exceptions. And one of the exceptions were, you talked about a phrase that I have heard all my life growing up in Vietnam, is đàn bà đái không qua ngọn cỏ, meaning that women can't even pee, higher than the grass. So why would we even get them a chance to stand up? They can never stand up. They will always be kept down, and keeping them there is their rightful place. What are the key messages were you trying to convey with this statement? And speak a little bit more about the gender inequality in Vietnamese society in your writing process and in developing the characters.
Oh, chị Diệp, you just talk a little bit about how you had the courage to leave Vietnam in search of opportunity for education. And I just want to salute you because you made it to Harvard University as a boat refugee. I mean, this is most amazing. And I need to talk to you more about what you had to go through, to gain.
I was lucky.
No, you are very bright and you've done amazing things for other people. And, you asked me about the sense of hope. You are a symbol of how the bravery and the courage of Vietnamese women, I think the spirit of hope and of resilience in the women in the novel is very much inspired by the Vietnamese women whom I grew up with. For example, my mom is an orphan. She lost her parents from a very young age, but she never stops believing in the kindness of people. And she always told me, trong cái rủi có cái may, good luck hides inside bad luck. She always has that that kind of hopeful spirit. And I think every human being has two sides. We have the darker side and, and a more kind side. And my mother wants to look at people, on the side of kindness. And I think Grandma Diệp Lan in the Mountain Sing is very much inspired by her character. But you mentioned about the proverb đàn bà đái không qua ngọn cỏ, women can't pee higher than tips of grass blades, and it's used all the time in Vietnam. If a man want to brush aside a woman's opinion, she's đàn bà đái không qua ngọn cỏ. And I need to, I'm writing my second book, a second novel, and I'm weaving in quite a few of these proverbs that that is very much, linked to the gender discrimination in Vietnam. For example, there's this saying, nhất nam viết hữu, thập nữ viết vô. One son is a child, 10 daughters equal none. Can you believe that?
I can't believe it.
Nowadays,
I just wrote that on the chat.
So as a woman, you are really you have the burden to produce a son for your family, for your in-law family, so that they can continue the family bloodline. Otherwise, you are seen as useless. So, they have been in the countryside, there have been circumstances where the husbands give themselves the right to marry or to have a mistress so that he could have a son. So there's also another saying, đàn ông nông nổi giếng khơi, đàn bà sâu sắc như cơi đựng trầu. Careless men are still as deep as water wells. Caring women are as deep as the bowls that hold bitter leaves. So, even though for the most thoughtful women, we are still very shallow, whereas, the careless men are so deep as water well. So there's so much gender discrimination embedded in the Vietnamese culture, and I spoke against it in the Mountain Sing, so the use of the proverb, women can't pee higher than blades of grass, is one example how I highlighted how Grandma Diệu Lan fought against that kind of perception against women. And I also had her fight against many things. For example, the lack of educational opportunities given to girls, because traditionally girls are said, because we serve the husband's families anyway, so we don't need, proper education. So the parents traditionally are less likely to invest in education for girls in Vietnam. And also, women, because we we have periods, so we are perceived to be dirty. So I remember when I was growing up, I remember one day, I grew up in Bạc Liêu town. So I studied at university. I studied for 1 year in Saigon, and, the trip would take, many hours. So I had a lift in the truck of my friend's family. So I was to get to my seat. So I went through the driver's seat. And the driver, he got so upset at me. He said, "You are a girl. You're not allowed to cross the driver's
bad
seat."
luck, so much bad luck.
There's so much bad luck. You could cause an accident because women are dirty, So I reflected on that experience, and I wrote in the Mountain Sing how Grandma Diệu Lan said about women were not allowed to drive buffalo carts, or even, cross the seat of the driver, because they would cause the cart to tumble. So there's just so many incredible things that the women of Vietnam have to go through. And if you look at the things we have achieved, I mean, I salute the women of Vietnam. So that's why I had to put the stories of Vietnamese women on the center stage of the Mountain Sing, because I grew up around, incredible women, and I did not see their stories in literature. And I felt like I need to reclaim the narrative for us, for us to tell our own stories. And I think, when women look at wars, for example, we can add a different dimension, right? We can enrich the story, because stories from women's point of view are more family focused, right? We focus on the family dynamics, and we highlight the cost of war, on its destruction on families, on society, on nature. So there's so much we can add if we tell, stories from women's point of view in related to wars and violence.
I think claiming the narrative is so important, isn't it? because I think that often women are heralded in Vietnam as powerful, and yet, you know, I think that right now, if you look at the Politburo, I think there's one woman being elected this year. So I really do believe that all of the heralding that had happened is burying a systemic and systematic gender discrimination, and that continues today in severe ways. You know, the work that I do is really about today and the future, and yet, you know, reading your novel is sending me through traumas. But you know what you just said about bearing children, our scholarship girls, one of the young women, I spoke to a mother of a young woman who's in our scholarship program, and she said that the reason she doesn't have a husband is because she had 2 girls, and her husband just took her and deposited her back to her parents' house. And then he went on to marry somebody else. And we are talking about today's. We're not talking about 100 years ago or 50 years ago. We're talking about today. The little girl who's in our scholarship program, she's only 14 or 15, sorry, 15 years old, right? And yet at the same time, you know, another horror story about the women that I work with and the young women that I work with who are suffering seriously from this discrimination is a trafficking survivor who told me that she was tricked to be sold over to China and to be a wife in a family. And she asked the woman who tricked her and begged her to let her go back. But this woman said, no, just stay there and bear a son for the family, and then I will let you go back. And 2 years later, this girl decided to escape and leave behind her newborn because she said that she finally understood enough Chinese to know that the family who bought her had decided to sell her forward now that she had delivered a child. So this discrimination, you know, is not just about not the ability of not being able to go to school or the ability to not be able to become prime minister in a country, but really it affects our girls so severely. And this is why I think claiming the narrative, understanding it, that, you know, people cannot herald you to be hero and then turn around and allow for the discrimination to continue. I think that's very important. So
that's so true, and it's so, you know, so great that you highlighted the impact of the gender discrimination. And it's not just about, you know, it affects women's life significantly, you know, and their livelihood and their survival as well, right? I mean,
exactly. This is a matter of life and death. It's not a matter of simply, oh, you know, I didn't get to go to college, so I went to Harvard instead. You know, I think that my story of how lucky I am compared to what I have seen out there is really, really traumatizing.
Oh no!
But anyway, so you have, you know, I mean, how then do you think Vietnamese women and youth can contribute to reframe this historical, you know, this narrative and also the historical events that have shaped our lives?
I mean, before I answer that question, I wanted to share with you a story within my family. My cousin could only give birth to 2 daughters. 4 years, she was abused by her in-law family. You know, like in Vietnam, they have you know, so the men who cannot produce sons, they also feel shameful you know. So sometimes at parties, you know, their friends would make fun out of them, right? So then they go home and they abuse their women. So my cousin, she suffered for so many years. So that's why the rate of abortion in Vietnam is really high, you know, because women,
I know Vietnam used to have one of the highest abortion rate in the world. Yes.
Yes, because people need to have a son, so they just keep being, you know, they get pregnant. So if it's a girl, they abort. And can you imagine these mothers, what they feel, how they feel? So I have a cousin who had 2 daughters, and she suffered, you know, so much abuse in the in-law family, and I think she was very depressed for a while. And many women like that, you know, quite a few of them committed suicide, became depressed, or were divorced or are divorced by their husbands. So my cousin luckily had the 3rd child. But you know, in Vietnam, you are not allowed to have 3 children. The official policy is that,
yes, I mean, you'll be fined by the government. Yes.
So my cousin is a teacher, so she would risk losing her job.
She may lose her job. Yes.
Yes. So if she had a 3rd child, and luckily for her, luckily the 3rd child was the son. You know what she had to do? She had to pretend she was not pregnant at all. After her birth, she did the paper to adopt the son.
Yeah, so all kinds of weird things happening because of this discrimination. Yes.
It's terrible, and I am so grateful that you are doing things to empower, you know, the women. I think we need to speak up, you know, for ourselves and against these issues. And I think it's time that more women, more young people, especially young women, you know, speak up for our rights. You know, I think there's a movement, the Me Too movement in Vietnam, but it didn't go very well. I mean, the women who spoke up were like, you know, you invited this man because of the way you dress. So they started blaming on these women. And you know, like, women in Vietnam get abused all the time, get sexually molested all the time. There's a research that was done recently on the very high percentage of the women who are sexually harassed, but we don't dare to speak up against those, you know, actions. So I think, yes, definitely there should be more stories on sexual discrimination in Vietnam by women ourselves, and we need also the support of men. And I think you know, I think the role of mothers are very important. I think somehow I was reflecting that, you know, as mothers, there's a tendency in Vietnam, you know, for mothers to be more protective towards sons, to favor sons. And I think, you know, to erase gender discrimination, mothers should take a leading role there. You know, we should treat our children equally, give them equal opportunity, and also, you know, discipline our sons if they don't behave, instead of, you know, favoring them all the time. So there is so much to do. And I was just reading this book, Born in 1982, of a Korean writer. And when I'm reading it, I'm like, whoa, this is so true. How it's, you know, the gender discrimination in Korea, it's so similar than in Vietnam when I was growing up. It's, you know, if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. Born in 1982. I think East Wind Bookstore must have it too.
Well, I think there are quite a few messages in the chat rooms. I want to kind of say something to that. I think that the objectification of women has gone on worldwide. I think that there are many people in Vietnam who say, oh, well, you know, we are Vietnamese and we are, you know, not, our tradition is less sexist than the Chinese Confucian traditions are. And I think that it's really not about how less sexist we are, or how, you know, or how more the Chinese culture is sexist, but it is what impacts we still have today in our society. And I think that people often don't realize that, you know, we continue to perpetuate the, you know, all of these negative things against women and girls and limiting them. I remember talking to a brilliant woman some years ago, I mean 2 decades ago, and she told me that, oh, it's just that, you know, I believe that women should not be leaders. And because women, you know, whenever women become the supreme leader, then there's a lot of bloodshed. And I'm like, maybe if we don't maybe if we don't try to control women all along, then there doesn't need to be bloodshed revolution to bring a woman to power. But I think that I think that women need to be at the table in policies. Women need to be understood that, you know, this 55 years old limit of retirement in Vietnam versus the men 60 years old is really wrong. Many people are looking forward to it, but I have seen so many women, I mean, retirement, you live until 90 years old. What are you going to do with yourself for 35 years? And yet, you know, when you think about this 55 years old, 55 year of age, how do you say, what is it, retirement age for women? You just finished childbearing. You know, you just finished childbearing, child rearing, and you're about to enter, you know, one of the most productive time of your life. And then people are saying, oh, well, you need to retire. I'm like, for what reason? And so you see all of those things for people to say, oh, that's a really benefiting women. That's really advancing women. And I said, no, you're not advancing women when they don't get to be the top person. You're not advancing women when they don't get to say, have a say in their, about their body, about their lives. So I think that, you know, there's a long conversation coming.
I completely agree that more women should be leaders. You know, more women should be involved in policy making. You know, I think in many ways, women make better leaders. You know, we are more.
No, we need the best people to be our leaders, right? And we need to have a sensibility about all of these things. But you know, let's just go back to your novel, because I think what's amazing to me is that Yang showed herself to be the leader, right, throughout this whole thing, and yet and you know, and yet she doesn't get. I mean, she's the one who made the decision to become Gong Buong. She's the one to make the decision to rebuild and rebuild every single time. And I think that kind of resilience you see more in across the Vietnamese spirit. But I'm so glad that this book highlights that in a woman. It's not that she's just gonna forgive and forget. It's not that. It's about recollecting their children, about rephrasing everything, you know, rebuild her home over and over again. And that, I think, is so powerful in the book that comes out. So tell me, when you're writing this book, surely you research a lot of families. And so tell me about the emotional impact of that and the process of it too. But, you know, why is it that your husband said to you that this book is going to kill you?
Yeah, because I couldn't sleep. You know, like during the 7 years I worked on the book, you know, I hardly slept, and I would be working at writing at 2, 3 in the morning, because I heard voices from my characters who told me, get up, our stories can't sleep until you tell them. So, you know, and my husband said this this book is going to kill you. He has never seen me working like that before. But I think I felt really compelled because I spoke to people in real life who told me stories about what happened to them. And I felt like, especially women, and I felt like, you know, I need to document these stories onto paper because I can't let them be forgotten. So, you know, writing about trauma is very challenging because you have to live the trauma yourself. You have to imagine it, you have to feel it in your bones so that you can express it with your pen. So yeah, but I'm really thankful at the opportunity to tell my story because not many women have the chance to do that. So I'm really grateful to be here. But you know, so chị Diệp, I need to ask you about the Pacific Links Foundation because I'm aware that time is limited. So that's why I was trying to interrupt you before. I'm like, I don't need to talk about my book anymore because your work is much more important, and you have helped many people. So I just want to congratulate you for the Global Citizens Award in 2018. So could you tell us why you started the Pacific Links Foundation and your mission and objectives?
Pacific Links Foundation was started by a group of people who really want to do, who are Vietnamese American and who want to do something to support the development of Vietnam. So that's definitely the key part of how we started the organization. Now in 2001, that's when, so now we are 20 years old. I wish I'm 20, but I'm not, far from it. So 20 years ago, we started this and we wanted to Pacific Links to be a vehicle to support the development of all communities, Vietnamese community worldwide, not just in Vietnam. But, in 2003, I came to realize that one of the most serious obstacle in development that Vietnam faces has got to be human trafficking. And, human trafficking back in 2003 is not a concept that people are well aware of or, understand what it is about. I was very naive in thinking that, we talked about it for 2-3 years and people would understand it. But now that we are 17 years later, we're still working on it. So we have two main programs. One is the counter-trafficking program, and the other one is the empowerment education program. So we see the two things to be, pretty much the same two sides of the same coin. So that's what we've been engaging in. We want to see the young people in Vietnam, especially young girls in Vietnam, to have the opportunity not just to escape trafficking, but to gain a self-determination power. And that is what our empowerment is all about.
So you have helped, like your organization has helped so many people, and you told us some moving stories about, some of the beneficiaries. Can you tell us one of the stories that has, can you tell us more?
Well, I try to forget a lot of stories because I think it traumatized me. But I will tell you this: in the past 17 years of working in human trafficking area, and also working with our scholarship people, I have heard pretty much all the horror stories in the world, and it's not useful to be focusing on things that you can't do anything about, but really to focus on looking forward. Your book is about the past, and what we're trying to do with Pacific Links is really to build the future, right? And in that sense, one of the stories that really impacted, has a lot of impact on me in recent years is a story of a young woman who was a superb student. She was 15 years old when she was tricked to cross the border, sold to a family. She had a daughter, and at 16 years old, she decided that she must go back to Vietnam. It's not so much that she realized that her quote unquote husband's family in China is well-to-do enough compared to her family in Vietnam. But she came back to us and she helped rescue some of the young women who were in the same village, being in the same situation with her. But when she came back to us, we asked her, what is it that you want to do with your life? And she's like, I've always wanted to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. And we're like, oh my God, how are we gonna fulfill this dream, right? We didn't say it to her, but we said to her, look, we want you to do what you want to do, what you came back to Vietnam for. And she said, I did not want to die in China. I want to become a doctor. And she came back. She became top student in her high school, finished high school, and she's now in pharmacy school and in Ho Chi Minh City. She's in private pharmacy school. It's very expensive, but she's top of her class. And she will become a doctor once, the 4-year pharmacy is done, and then she'll go to medical school. So I am saying that, back to what I was saying earlier, can you imagine? They were ripping away from Vietnam a young woman, a mind that could become a doctor, to be used just as a handmaiden to create little babies, and not having any say whatsoever about that. So to me, being able to put her in medical school is what this is all about. It shows that, the Vietnamese women ability to, the resilience, the ability to really think for themselves, and the determination to survive. And so I'll say to you that story certainly is something that I remind myself every time that we pay her tuition.
Mm-hmm.
We see Jenny here.
Thank you. I could have loved to talk to you much more about Pacific Links Foundation, and I encourage everyone to visit the foundation's website. And because they have there are so many amazing stories. You can read about those who got the scholarships from Pacific Links and whose lives have been changed, have been empowered. So I encourage you.
Well, I just want to be clear that we have one of the largest scholarship programs in Vietnam right now. We have about 3,000 children in our scholarship program from 9th grade to through college. But the young women who are trafficking survivors, those people are a very small set. The rest of them, we engage heavily in the prevention of trafficking.
Mm.
Thank you so much. I wish we had more time to hear you two talk more, but I also wanted to uplift all the activity that's going on in the chat, and also we have a couple of questions. So the first one is, but still in history and folk religion, there were so many heroines and female deities which played very important roles in the flow of Vietnamese culture as well as cults. So I am just wondering, if we put these two perceptions in the line together, how can we think of Vietnamese women in the term of their real positions, roles, contributions?
Diệp, you want to take the questions first?
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there are contradictions. If you go to Vietnam, you see the street, Hai Ba Trưng Street, the Ba Trưng Queen sisters who led the Vietnamese people defeat the Chinese army, who are considered heroes. And we have women heroes in Vietnam. But on the other hand, there are things which are deeply rooted in our culture. For example, if a man, if someone says that a man is weak, the person will say, oh, nó là đàn ông mặc váy, he's a man that wears a skirt, so like he's weak, he's incapable of doing great things. So I think the potential of Vietnamese women is tremendous. And like chị Diệp said in the beginning, the challenge of Vietnam is how to capitalize on the potential of women. Women who can contribute to the sustainable development of Vietnam, women who can, contribute to policies, to make change in all areas, women who are artists, who are writers, who are creators, who are storytellers, who are politicians. We need to see more politicians who are women. And I think, I think that the change that we need to make, should be on the individual basis, but should be supported by families as well as schools and as society. And I think, for example, when I think about education, our education should have more stories that fight against, gender discrimination and highlight the role and the importance of women and put us on an equal level with men. There's so much to be done.
I think that's enough. We can go to the next question. I can tell other horror stories, but yeah.
Yeah, we have a second question. How do we involve Vietnamese men in this conversation? Younger generations, but the patriarchy and deep Confucius teaching to put the women lower than men. We need men to support the equality of women and have women be able to take up more space and be more visible like you both are doing.
Well, I think it has to start with mothers. I think that many times mothers, after, especially I've heard horror stories of mothers who suffer as a daughter-in-laws and then becoming horrible mother-in-laws themselves, right? So I really think it has to start with mothers and our decision to say, if you were a boy, if you were a girl or whatever, how would I treat you? How would I say yes to this or no to that? And I think that we have to be systematic. We have to be, and we have to be insisting on the girls having the chance at school. We are giving scholarship to young women from the Mekong Delta in the University of Information Technology. And she basically, many of them recounted the discrimination that they see in school, but they didn't have even the words to say that, that was discrimination. And I said, what do you mean by that? And said the teacher would only, would never call on girls. And he would only call on girls if the girls, if nobody else in the room can solve the problem. Then he calls on the girl and say, see, the girls don't know any solution. So mothers are first and then teachers are next. Seriously, the fathers, I see what Tiffany had responded here. Let's just not worry too much. Let's just go to the teachers, and many of whom are women. But many of the teachers, especially in high school, are men, especially in the science and the math, right? I challenge you to say that it's, a woman is less capable in math than a man. It is, anyhow. Yes, mothers and teachers, start there.
That's amazing. And also involve men in the campaign to fight against gender discrimination as well. Oh, and there is a chat in Vietnamese. Quê cô ở Việt Nam, quê cô ở tỉnh nào? Mình sinh ở Ninh Bình và mình lớn lên ở Bạc Liêu. So I was born in Ninh Bình and I grew up in Bạc Liêu in the south of Vietnam. But so, Vietnam, both north and south and the middle are my hometown, I would say. How about you, chị Diệp? You were born in...
I was born in Saigon. I'm a Saigon girl. But my parents, how do you say? My mother came from the Delta, and my father came from Quảng Nam, Hội An, and Quảng Nam. And I married my husband, whose family came from Nghệ An and Hanoi. So basically, my son covers the whole country in heritage. So I go to Nghệ An and I say I'm a mother, and I'm a daughter-in-law. And then now I just realized that my grandmother's side in Quảng Nam, actually, they came from Nghệ An as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, wonderful. The next question is about trauma and healing. There's so much trauma in our community. How do we work through this first and understand the impact and effects on our heart, our body, and soul? How do we get, I guess, support to see those deep wounds and start to heal with them? Because without healing, these unconscious and conscious acts of discrimination and violence will continue.
That's a very difficult, very important question. Thank you so much for asking that. I think I did my PhD, just finished my PhD, and one of my research questions is the impact of trauma. And it's like trauma can be inherited, through generations. So,
I believe so.
Yeah,
yes.
So there's so much danger if we don't help each other heal. And I think the healing process can only be possible if there's there's communion of trauma, if we discuss our trauma, if we open up. I think this dialogue today is a starting point where we open up and we become vulnerable. We talk about the things that hurt us, and I think if we open up and if we talk about what we went through, what traumatized us, we feel that we are not alone, and then we can lend each other support. And I think there should be more conversations, within our Vietnamese and diasporic Vietnamese community, because I think we have not talked to each other enough. And I think it's something that is very sad to me that, there's still, the war ended so long ago, but they're still fighting, within our community, so I think it's time that we come together and help each other heal. And I think it's important for us to understand experiences of those on the other side, and listen to stories from those whose families may have fought on the other side of, or whose family might have stood on the opposite side of the war with our own family, and be, I think there is so much for us to do to help each other heal. And I think we need to have more conversations like this.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. I think that if you believe that abuse is, abused parents become somebody who's abused as a child then become an abusive parent, then it is very difficult to refute the issue that if somebody is traumatized, all the trauma and the PTSD that ensue in one generation won't carry to the next generation. So I think that the conversation has got to start as soon as possible. People have to understand more about the history of where our community has come from, but also, we have to find a way to be more positive. I think Vietnamese are very much survivalists, and often because of our habits, of our understanding of how to be a survivor. What I mean by that is, like, when I was growing up, me having to wear glasses when I was a teenager, suddenly it was just like, oh, you're blind, you're just worthless now. And it's just like that sense of only the fittest survive. And when you go forward, not recognizing that you've been traumatized, not recognizing that everyone around you has been traumatized by this collective experience, that is where we missed the opportunity to be together, and that's where we really missed an opportunity to heal.
Thank you. We are at 7, but I don't know if you wanted to shortly or quickly answer these questions. Were there any intended audience in your mind when you wrote the novel? And what does reading literature do? And what are the struggles of ethics you had when representing these war violences?
Thank you for the great questions. So I think I wrote this novel for myself at first to understand the complicated history of Vietnam, and also I was thinking about Vietnamese women or Vietnamese people. So my first audience is Vietnamese people. I wrote this for Vietnamese, for us Vietnamese people, and to honor what our ancestors have had to go through. And I think there were many challenges, in terms of representation. I wanted to represent Vietnamese women not just as heroes, not just as perfect characters like Grandma Diệp Lan. She also has weaknesses. She had to make difficult decisions that she had to bear the consequences throughout her life. So yeah, I think you mentioned about the ethical principles in documenting, Vietnamese history through this, and I think it's very complicated. And I think the best I could do is, to do as much research as I could and be open to stories from all sides of the war. And I think I wanted to write this story to highlight the value of peace, the value of family, and the value of forgiveness. I think wars and violence cause so much damage to us, and I think in the circumstances of wars, people were forced into doing horrible things. So I think forgiveness is so important, and I think nobody is perfect. So I wrote this also to forgive myself and remind myself, the need to forgive others. And I need to tell you that one of the characters in my novel, Wicked Ghost, is someone who comes from a real life experience, related to my family. So my grandma was killed in the Great Hunger of 1945, where around 2 million Vietnamese people perished under the French and the Japanese occupation of Vietnam. And she was killed on a corn plant by the guard of her village. And because, my father and his sister were so hungry and were dying, so my grandma ventured to the cornfield and tried to steal some corn for her children, and the guard caught her and tied her to the corn plants, and she was too weak to break away, so she died. So then when I was when I could talk to my father, he told me what had happened to my grandma. So I told myself, one day I'm going to write a story with this wicked person in it, and I would wish him a lot of bad things. I wanted to do horrible things to his family. I wanted to do revenge with my writing, but in the end I found forgiveness instead. For those who haven't read the novel, you will find out in the end. But I think forgiveness is something which is so important for peace for ourselves and peace for our community, peace for others. And I wish nothing else than peace for all of us. When I was a child growing up in Vietnam, I look at the bomb craters around me. I look at the people without arms and legs, the people who lost family members or had family members in re-education camps. I told myself, look at all of this. The human race would not be so stupid as to wage another war. And I thought like that, and I truly believed in it. of course, I was very naive. And now look at us, we keep destroying each other's, countries. And I think, your question asked about the role of literature. I think I really believe, like what Hương said in The Mountain Sing, if humans are willing to read each other and see into the light of other stories and culture, there would be no war on earth. We would respect each other more, respect each other culture. There would be no more kindness and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is a good note to end on. Yes, thank you so much, Quế Mai. And yep, I wanted to highlight that if you really enjoyed the talk like I did today, you can buy the book The Mountain Sing at asiabookcenter.com. And we have 10% of event book sales will be donated to Pacific Links Foundation and all the work that they are doing. And so in closing, I just wanted to thank you two again so much. If you want to support us in creating more of these dialogues and events, we encourage you to check out our bookstore. And also please check out Pacific Links Foundation and all the work they're doing to not just combat human trafficking and forced labor, but also empower women and youth. And if you have trouble finding the book and getting it shipped out to you, please email us and we'll definitely figure out a way. And so we'll also follow up with an email of an event recording and some follow-up links. And if Quế Mai and yep, if you two have any closing thoughts, we can also.
No, I think we're talking enough. Thank you so much for attending this, for enabling us to tell our stories.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your attendance. I saw a lot of great discussions out there, and thank you for your active participation. And I'm sorry if we didn't get to answer all of your questions, but we hope to be able to do that in other events. And I really hope you will support East Wind Bookstore, an Asian-owned bookstore whose work has been working so hard during this pandemic, and of course Pacific Links Foundation. And Diệp, you also talk about, you also accept volunteers, right?
We need volunteers. We need volunteers. We have programs that need thousands of volunteers. So yes, we can to connect to the kids and bring them. Yeah, we have a lot of activities. So please check us out online. But I want to say thank you to everyone. And again, thank you for braving it and listening to this very difficult conversation. And thank you, Quế Mai, for writing this novel.
Thank you so much, Diệp. If you can stay for a few minutes, can Diệp talk about the volunteer program, because I think a lot of people could be interested in a volunteer. I mean, can you brief us on your volunteer program?
Quế Mai, you don't have to feel so guilty about everything, No, it's okay. We currently have a tutoring program that basically you can do the tutoring, English tutoring online to a high school college student, and you can sign up. Diane has the link here. It's our program is called eTalk. We have about 2,000 students waiting for a small group tutoring, so one-on-one, and so we really hoping to see you there. We are also always looking for young women professionals to share your story so that we can enable and empower the other, the thousands of young women who are in our scholarship program right now. So thank you very much for highlighting that. Thanks.
Thank you for your amazing work. I wish you lots of success and creative energy in your work. Thank you so much, East Wind Bookstore, for hosting us, and thank you everyone for attending. I hope that everything will stay well with you and your family, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.